Hi guys, welcome to the Sleepy History Facts. I'm so glad you've joined me tonight. Tonight, we will gently travel across time to a land of mountains and quiet valleys where one of the most remarkable structures in human history slowly took shape. The Great Wall of China is not just a wall, but a long story that stretches across centuries. It carries with it the whispers of emperors, workers, soldiers, and travelers. So take a slow, deep breath in and gently let it out. But for now, you don't need to do anything at all. Just settle in, relax, and allow your mind to wander gently through the quiet pages of history. If you're ready, let's begin. Long before the Great Wall became a single, continuous structure, the land we now call China was divided into many smaller regions. These regions were ruled by different leaders, each with their own armies, traditions, and ways of life. The land itself was vast and varied, with wide plains, winding rivers, and distant mountains that seemed to fade into the sky. In those early times, people lived closely connected to the rhythm of nature. They worked in the fields during the day, growing crops like millet and rice, and gathered with their families in the evening as the light slowly disappeared. Life was often peaceful, but it was also uncertain. Beyond the borders of each region, there were always unknown dangers. To protect their homes and farmland, some of these early kingdoms began building simple walls. These were not the towering stone structures we imagine today. Instead, they were made from packed earth, carefully pressed down layer by layer until it became firm and strong. Workers would use wooden tools to shape the yard, creating barriers that stretched across hills and valleys. These early walls were quiet and humble in appearance. From a distance, they might have looked like natural ridges in the land, but to the people who built them, they were a sign of safety. They marked the boundary between what was familiar and what was unknown. Historians believe that these walls were often built during times of fear or tension, when neighboring regions grew stronger or conflicts became more common. The need for protection increased. The walls were not just physical barriers, but also a way to bring a sense of calm to the people living behind them. Another fascinating detail appears when we consider how these walls were built. There were no large machines or advanced tools. Everything was done by hand. Workers carried baskets of soil, lifted heavy materials, and spent long hours under the open sky. The work was slow, steady, and required great patience. Yet, even in these early efforts, we can see the beginnings of something much larger. The idea of building a barrier to protect a people, to define a space, and to create security was taking root. It was a quiet idea at first, growing slowly over time. In some regions, these walls were built along natural features like hills or rivers. This made them easier to defend and helped them blend into the environment. It also showed how closely people observed the land around them, using its natural shapes to guide their construction. Life near these early walls carried a different feeling. Farmers would work their land, knowing that a barrier stood nearby. Children might play in the shadow of these earth structures, unaware of the larger purpose they served. And at night, when the world grew still, the walls stood silently under the stars, watching over the land. But history holds another quiet surprise. These early walls were not connected to one another. Each kingdom built its own, with its own design and purpose. There was no single vision yet, no grand plan to create a structure that would stretch across the entire land. Still, these small beginnings were important. They were like the first gentle steps in a much longer journey. Over time, as kingdoms grew and leaders changed, the idea of the wall would grow as well. And so, in the quiet landscapes of ancient China, with simple tools and steady hands, the earliest forms of the Great Wall began to take shape, not as a single line, but as many small efforts, each one adding to a story that would continue for centuries. As time moved forward, the peaceful rhythm of daily life in ancient China began to change. The land that had once been divided into smaller regions slowly entered a period of growing tension. Different kingdoms became stronger, and with strength came ambition. Each ruler wanted to protect their land, but also to expand it. This period is often remembered as a time of constant movement and uncertainty. Armies marched across open fields, and messengers carried urgent news from one place to another. The air itself may have felt different, filled with quiet chinta and watchfulness. People continued their daily lives, tending crops and raising families, but there was always an awareness that things could change quickly. In response to this growing tension, many kingdoms began to strengthen their defenses. The simple earth walls of earlier times were no longer enough. Rulers ordered longer, thicker, and more carefully planned barriers. These walls stretched farther than before, sometimes running along hills or cutting across wide plains. Each kingdom worked on its own wall, building it according to its needs and resources. Some walls were raised on high ground, giving guards a better view of the surrounding land. Others were built closer to important almeden or fertile farmland, protecting the heart of the kingdom. The designs were not the same, but the purpose was shared. Historians often describe this time as one of innovation as well as conflict. Builders began to experiment with different methods. Instead of only using loose earth, they pressed the soil more tightly, sometimes mixing it with gravel or other materials to make it stronger. Wooden frames were used to shape the walls, helping them stand taller and last longer. Another fascinating detail appears when we think about how these walls were guarded. Soldiers were stationed along them, watching for any sign of movement beyond the borders. Their days were often quiet, filled with long hours of observation. They would look out across open land where the horizon seemed to stretch endlessly. At night, the experience was very different. The world became darker and quieter, and every small sound might have felt important. A distant movement, the rustle of wind through grass, or the faint sound of hooves could signal danger. Guards had to remain alert, even when the silence felt heavy. But history also shows that these walls were not perfect barriers. They could slow down movement, but they could not stop it completely. Armies sometimes found ways around them, or even through them. Still, the walls served an important purpose. They provided time for people to prepare, time for messages to be sent, and time for defenses to be organized. In another corner of the past, these walls also shaped the lives of ordinary people. Villages near the borders often lived with a sense of caution. Families might have prepared zapas of food or made plans for safety in case of conflict. Yet, life continued. Markets opened, children learned from elders, and traditions were passed down. There is something quietly powerful about this time in history. Even in the face of uncertainty, people continued to build, to protect, and to hope for stability. The walls they created were not just made of earth and wood, but also of effort and intention. As the years passed, these separate walls began to form a kind of pattern across the land. Though they were not connected, they shared a common idea. Each one was a response to the same feeling, the need for suraksha in an ever-changing world. And while no one at that time could fully see it, these growing lines of defense were slowly preparing the way for something much larger. The scattered walls, built by many hands and many kingdoms, were beginning to shape the early outline of what would one day become the Great Wall of China. As the walls grew longer and stronger during these uncertain times, the need for workers also increased. Building such large structures required many hands, and so people from different parts of the kingdoms were brought together for this demanding task. Some were farmers, some were laborers, and others were soldiers assigned to construction work. Life as a builder was not easy. The work often took place far from home, in places where the land was rough and the weather could change quickly. In some regions, the sun would shine intensely during the day, warming the lard until it felt dry and heavy. In other areas, cold winds would move across the hills, making even simple tasks feel more difficult. Workers began their days early, often before the sun had fully risen. The light would slowly spread across the sky as they lifted tools, carried soil, and shaped the walls piece by piece. There was a rhythm to their work, a steady pattern of movement that continued hour after hour. They used simple tools made of wood and stone. There were no machines to assist them, no easy way to move large amounts of material. Instead, everything depended on human effort. Soil was gathered, placed into wooden frames, and pressed down firmly to create solid layers. This method, repeated again and again, slowly raised the walls higher. Historians believe that the technique of packing earth was carefully developed over time. When done correctly, the layers became surprisingly strong, able to withstand wind and rain for many years. It was a quiet form of skill, passed from one group of workers to another, but behind this steady progress, there was also hardship. Many workers faced exhaustion from long hours and physical strain. Food was sometimes simple and limited, often consisting of basic grains or vegetables. Water had to be carried from nearby sources, and in some places it was not always easy to find. Another fascinating detail appears when we think about how isolated these workers might have felt. Far from their families and familiar surroundings, they lived in temporary camps near the construction sites. At night, after a long day of labor, they would rest under the open sky or in simple shelters, listening to the quiet sounds of the natural world around them. In those moments of rest, the walls they were building may have seemed almost endless. Stretching across hills and valleys, they grew slowly, one layer at a time. Each worker contributed a small part, but together their efforts created something much larger than any single person could achieve. Elsewhere in the ancient world, great structures were also being built, but there is something especially striking about the scale of these early walls. They did not rise in a single place, like a temple or a palace. Instead, they extended across the landscape, following its natural curves and shapes. The builders had to adapt constantly. In rocky areas, they worked with stone. In softer land, they relied more on packed earth. The wall was not a uniform structure, but a reflection of the land itself. This made the work even more challenging, as each new section required a slightly different approach. And yet, despite these difficulties, the work continued. Day after day, season after season, the walls expanded. The effort was quiet but persistent, driven by the belief that these structures would bring greater safety to the people they protected. In a gentle way, This period of construction tells us something about human determination. Even in harsh conditions, with limited resources, people found ways to create something lasting. Their work was not always seen or celebrated at the time, but it became part of a much larger story. As the walls continued to rise, they carried with them the strength and endurance of those who built them. And though the journey was difficult, it was also laying the foundation for the grand vision that would soon begin to take shape. As the walls continued to grow across the wide and varied landscapes of ancient China, the builders began to rely more deeply on the land itself. The materials they used were not brought from distant places. Instead, they were gathered from the land beneath their feet, shaped by the environment around them. In the northern regions, where the soil was dry and firm, builders often used a method known as rammed earth. They would place loose soil into wooden frames and press it down again and again until it became dense and solid. Over time, these layers formed thick walls that could stand for many years, quietly resisting wind and weather. In areas where the land was rocky, the approach changed. Builders collected stones from nearby hills and valleys, stacking them carefully to create stronger and more durable sections. These stone walls had a different feeling. They were heavier, cooler to the touch, and often more resistant to erosion. Another fascinating detail appears when we consider regions with forests. In these places, wood became an important part of construction. Wooden beams were used to support structures or to create frames for shaping the earth. Though wood did not last as long as stone, it played a vital role in the building process. This close connection between the wall and the land gave each section a unique character. If you were to walk along the wall in those early times, you might notice subtle changes. The color of the wall could shift from deep brown to pale tones. The texture might feel smooth in one place and rough in another. These differences reflected the natural world surrounding each part of the wall. Historians often point out that this method of using local materials made construction more practical. Transporting heavy materials over long distances would have been extremely difficult. By working with what was nearby, builders could continue their work steadily, even in remote areas. But this also meant that the strength of the wall varied from place to place. Some sections were more durable, while others were more vulnerable to time and weather. Rain could slowly wash away layers of earth, and strong winds might shape the surface over the years. In another corner of the past, this process reveals something quietly beautiful. The wall was not separate from nature, but deeply connected to it. It followed the curves of hills, climbed over mountains, and moved alongside rivers. It became part of the landscape, almost as if it had grown from the land itself. Workers had to carefully observe their surroundings. They needed to understand the soil, the rocks, and the climate. This knowledge was not written in books, but learned through experience. Over time, builders developed a quiet understanding of how to shape materials so they would last longer. Life near these construction sites also reflected this connection to nature. People depended on nearby resources for food, water, and shelter. The same land that provided materials for the wall also supported the lives of those building it. But history holds another gentle insight. Because the wall was built using natural materials, parts of it would eventually return to the land. Sections made of earth could slowly blend back into the surrounding soil. becoming less visible over time. This gave the wall a kind of life cycle shaped by both human effort and natural forces. As the years passed, the use of local materials continued to guide construction. It allowed the wall to stretch across vast distances, adapting to each new environment it encountered. And so, the Great Wall in its early forms was not just a human creation, but a quiet collaboration between people and the natural world. Each stone, each layer of earth, carried the story of the land it came from, forming a structure that was as much a part of nature as it was a part of history. As the centuries passed, the many separate kingdoms of ancient China continued to grow, compete, and change. The walls they built stood as quiet reminders of their boundaries, but the land itself remained divided. Each region had its own ruler, its own army, and its own way of life. But history was slowly moving toward a moment of great change. In time, one powerful state began to rise above the others. Its leaders were determined, its armed force was strong, and its ambitions stretched far beyond its own borders. Through a series of long and difficult conflicts, this state gradually overcame its rivals, bringing the separate kingdoms under a single rule. At the center of this transformation was a ruler known as Qin Shi Huang. He became the first emperor of a unified China, a figure remembered for his vision, his authority, and the vast changes he introduced. For the first time, the land was no longer divided into competing kingdoms. Instead, it was brought together under one power, with shared systems, shared laws, and a growing sense of unity. Roads were built to connect distant regions, writing systems were standardized, and efforts were made to bring consistency across the empire. And among these many changes, the walls also became part of a larger plan. Rather than building separate defenses for each former kingdom, the emperor ordered that many of the existing walls be connected. This was not a simple task. The walls had been built at different times, in different styles, and across very different landscapes. Yet, the idea was clear: to create a longer, continuous barrier that would help protect the northern borders of the newly unified empire. This marked a quiet but important turning point. The walls were no longer just local defenses. They were becoming part of something much greater, a shared structure that represented the strength and unity of the empire. Another fascinating detail appears when we think about the scale of this effort. The work required thousands of workers, including soldiers, laborers, and even those who had been sent as punishment. They traveled long distances, often leaving their homes behind, to take part in this enormous project. The construction continued across mountains, valleys, and open plains. Workers connected older walls, filled in gaps, and extended the structure further into the distance. The process was slow but steady. Layer by layer, the vision of a unified wall began to take shape. But alongside this great effort, there were also quiet challenges. The work was demanding, and the conditions were often harsh. Many people faced long days of labor with limited rest. The scale of the project meant that it touched the lives of countless individuals, each contributing in their own small way. Historians often reflect on the mixed nature of this time. On one hand, there was a sense of unity and progress. The empire was becoming more connected, and the wall was part of that connection. On the other hand, the effort required great sacrifice from those who built it. In another corner of the past, the wall also began to take on a new meaning. It was not only a defense against external threats, but also a symbol of the emperor's power. It showed the ability of a single ruler to organize people, resources, and land on a massive scale. As the wall stretched further, it began to form a visible line across the northern edge of the empire. From certain points, it might have seemed to disappear into the horizon, blending with the distant mountains. Yet it was there, steady and watchful. And so, under the rule of Qin Shi Huang, the scattered walls of the past were brought together into something more unified. It was still not the complete structure we think of today, but it was a significant step in that direction. The quiet idea that began with small earth walls had now grown into a vast project shaped by a single vision. And as the empire settled into its new form, the wall stood as both a protector and a symbol of a changing world. As the rule of Qin Shi Huang settled across the newly unified land, life for ordinary people began to change in quiet but noticeable ways. The empire was now connected under a single authority, and with that came new systems, new expectations, and a different rhythm of daily life. For many, the idea of unity brought a sense of order. Roads stretched across regions that were once separate, making travel more direct. Messengers could move faster, carrying news from one place to another. Traders found it easier to journey between distant towns, bringing goods, stories, and traditions with them. At the same time, the emperor introduced standardized systems. Writing became more uniform, allowing people from different regions to understand one another more easily. Weights and measures were also made consistent, which helped markets function more smoothly. These changes may have felt small at first, but they quietly shaped how people interacted and lived. Yet, alongside this growing sense of order, there was also a strictness that touched everyday life. Laws were firm, and expectations were clear. People were required to follow rules carefully, and the consequences of breaking them could be severe. This created an atmosphere where discipline was deeply valued, but also where fear could quietly exist. Another fascinating detail appears when we think about how these changes affected those working on the wall. Many laborers were sent to construction sites as part of their duties to the state. Some were soldiers assigned to help, while others were individuals who had been punished and ordered to work on these large projects. Their days followed a demanding routine. As the sun rose, they would begin their tasks, lifting materials, shaping the wall, and moving steadily along its growing length. The work required focus and endurance, and there was little room for rest during the day. In the evenings, when the light softened and the air cooled, there may have been moments of quiet reflection. Workers might sit together, sharing simple meals, speaking softly about their homes, or simply resting in silence. In these small moments, the vastness of the empire and the scale of the work may have felt both distant and very close at the same time. Elsewhere in the empire, families continued their daily routines. Farmers worked the land, guided by the seasons. Children learned from elders, listening to stories and traditions that had been passed down over generations. Even as the empire changed, many aspects of life remained familiar and steady. But history also shows that this period was not without strain. The demands of large projects like the wall, along with other state efforts, placed a heavy burden on the population. Resources were stretched, and many people were required to contribute their labor. In another corner of the past, the wall itself became a quiet presence in this changing world. It was not only a place of work, but also a symbol that could be seen from afar. Stretching across the landscape, it reminded people of the emperor's reach and the unity of the land. At times, the wall may have offered a sense of protection, standing between the empire and the unknown beyond. At other times, it may have felt like a distant line, far removed from the daily lives of those living in the heart of the empire. There is something gentle to reflect on in this balance between order and effort. The Qin dynasty brought structure and connection, but it also required great dedication from its people. The wall, growing steadily during this time, carried both of these truths within it. As the years passed, the empire continued to evolve. The foundations laid during this period would influence the future, shaping how later generations would build, govern, and live. And quietly, across the hills and valleys, the wall remained, growing, changing, and becoming part of a story that was still unfolding. The Great Wall stretched over mountains, valleys, and plains, and with every mile came new challenges for the workers. The distance itself created a quiet rhythm as groups of laborers worked in different locations, often far from each other. They could see only the next section of the wall, and yet they understood that their efforts were part of something much larger. Labor was long and steady, moving slowly like a river, carving its path through the land. Workers carried baskets of earth and stone up steep slopes, pressed soil into wooden frames, and layered materials carefully to create walls that would endure. The work required patience more than speed, and there was a quiet satisfaction in seeing a section rise steadily before the eyes. Each stone and each layer of packed earth became a mark of human determination, a testament to the countless hands shaping the land. Often, the labor was solitary. Soldiers and peasants might work side by side, yet each was absorbed in the rhythm of their task. The wind would sweep across the plains or whistle through mountain passes, carrying dust and echoes of distant voices. Occasionally, a bell or a shouted command would break the silence, but mostly the work continued quietly, day after day. Food and water were brought to the camps, simple meals shared among tired hands and dusty clothes. Nights were long and often cold, with the wall stretching like a shadow across the landscape. In these moments, the laborers could look at what they had built and imagine its importance, even if they did not know the full story of the empire it served. Another fascinating detail appears in the way the wall adapted to the land. Builders did not fight the curves of mountains or the dips of valleys. Instead, they worked with the natural shapes of the world. The wall rose and fell, climbed and dipped, moving gracefully across the terrain. This made each section unique, reflecting both human effort and the quiet influence of nature. Life near the construction sites was also shaped by this labor. Families sometimes accompanied workers, bringing what comfort they could. Children played quietly in the shadows of the growing wall, and evenings were often spent sharing stories or singing low, soft songs. Though the work was grueling, there was a rhythm to it, a flow that allowed the wall to rise steadily across vast distances. Over time, these countless sections joined together, creating lines of defense that seemed to stretch endlessly. Each segment was built with care, guided by experience, and shaped by the land itself. And so, across mountains and deserts, the silent labor continued, building not just walls of earth and stone, but a story of endurance, patience, and quiet determination that would echo for centuries to come. Along the winding stretches of the wall, small watchtowers rose at regular intervals, standing like quiet sentinels over the land. These towers were built with care, sometimes of stone, sometimes of brick, depending on the region, and they served as both shelters and observation points for the soldiers stationed there. From these elevated positions, guards could look across miles of plains, mountains, and valleys, watching for any sign of movement beyond the borders. At times, the work of a soldier was calm and uneventful, as days passed without incident. Yet, every so often, a distant cloud of dust or the glint of sunlight on a horse's armor might alert them to approaching visitors. Communication along the wall was both practical and clever. Guards used fire, smoke, and flags to send messages across long distances. During the day, colored smoke would rise from the towers, signaling a warning or sharing news. At night, fires flickered like quiet beacons, carrying messages across darkened hills. The rhythm of these signals was steady and deliberate, creating a silent language understood by those watching from far away. Another fascinating detail appears when we think about the coordination required. Each tower had to respond quickly and accurately, passing the message along to the next in line. In this way, information could travel faster than any rider on horseback. Life in the towers was often lonely. Soldiers spent hours observing, listening to the wind, and watching the slow movement of clouds across the sky. Nights were particularly quiet, broken only by the occasional sound of an owl or the rustle of leaves. Yet there was also a calm beauty to this vigilance. From their heights, guards could see the wall stretching in both directions, blending with the curves of mountains and the sweep of the land. They were part of something much larger than themselves, a structure that connected the empire and offered protection to those who lived below. In some regions, towers were also used to store supplies or house small groups of troops, allowing soldiers to rest or seek shelter from storms. These simple structures became important nodes in the quiet network of defense. The interplay of light and shadow along the wall, especially near the towers, added a gentle rhythm to the landscape. Fires at night glimmered like tiny stars, mirroring the heavens above, and smoke in the distance could resemble soft clouds drifting slowly across hills. But history reminds us that these watchtowers were not just practical. They were also symbols. They represented vigilance, preparation, and the quiet power of observation. Even in times of peace, their presence offered reassurance, a subtle reminder of protection and careful attention. And so, as the sun set and the winds whispered through valleys, the watchtowers stood patiently, carrying signals across the land and quietly shaping the way people experienced the vastness of the Great Wall. The Great Wall has a way of moving with the land, as if it were a living line tracing the curves of mountains and valleys. Unlike modern roads or fences, it does not cut straight across the landscape. Instead, it winds gracefully over hills, climbs steep mountain ridges, and dips gently into valleys, following the natural contours of the earth. This careful adaptation made construction both challenging and beautiful. Builders could not simply place walls in a straight line. They had to observe the land, understand the soil, and find ways to let the wall coexist with rivers, cliffs, and uneven terrain. In some places, the wall seems to rise out of the rocks themselves, as though the mountains themselves had grown into a protective line. This blending of human effort and nature created a quiet harmony, giving the wall a rhythm that changes with every turn of the land. Another fascinating detail appears when we think about the choice of routes. Mountains were often used as natural defense, reducing the need for additional fortifications. Plains were more vulnerable, so walls there were built higher and thicker, with watchtowers placed strategically to maintain oversight. The wall's course also influenced the lives of those nearby. Villages and towns often grew close to the barrier, using it as a landmark, a point of protection, and a guide through the vast terrain. Farmers worked fields along its edges, and travelers used it to navigate across open regions. In quiet moments, when the wind swept through mountain passes, the wall appeared almost like a ribbon, stretching endlessly into the distance. Its curves and angles were not just practical, but also visually striking, showing a subtle connection between human effort and the shapes of the earth. Soldiers stationed along these stretches also became intimately aware of the land. They learned how to read the terrain, noticing changes in soil, rock formations, and even vegetation, which could indicate areas where enemies might approach. Nature itself became part of the defense strategy, as the wall relied on cliffs, hills, and ridges to strengthen its presence. In some remote areas, the wall seems almost hidden, blending so seamlessly with the environment that it could be easily overlooked by a distant traveler. Yet its presence remained, a silent protector, quietly following the rhythms of the land. And so, the Great Wall is not only a product of human labor, but also a reflection of the landscapes it crosses. Each curve, slope, and bend tells the story of adaptation, patience, and observation, revealing the thoughtful interaction between people and nature in the creation of something timeless. Life along the Great Wall was often quiet, yet it carried a weight of vigilance that touched every day. Soldiers stationed on the wall spent long hours observing the land, moving along watchtowers, or patrolling stretches of earth and stone. The work was steady and repetitive, but it was also essential, forming the first line of defense against potential threats from beyond the borders. Many soldiers lived far from home, surrounded by mountains, plains, or deserts. Their days began with the soft light of dawn and continued until the sun sank below the horizon. They carried their weapons carefully, maintained their posts, and followed routines that ensured the wall remained secure. Another fascinating detail appears in their quiet moments of observation. From a high tower, a soldier could watch the mist rolling across a valley, the sun glinting off distant cliffs, or birds rising and falling in the wind. These small moments of natural beauty were often the only respite from the demands of duty. The soldiers also relied on one another, forming a network of support along the wall. Even if they were stationed miles apart, they shared signals and messages that connected them, allowing them to act as one quiet, coordinated presence. Nights were especially serene and reflective. Fires in the towers flickered softly against the darkness, casting shadows that danced along the walls. Wind whispered through cracks and crevices, carrying the faint scent of earth and stone. In these hours, soldiers might sit quietly, listening to the subtle sounds of the landscape and feeling a sense of being part of something much larger than themselves. Life was not always dangerous, yet the soldiers understood the importance of readiness. Each watch, each patrol, each carefully placed observation post contributed to the protection of entire regions and countless families living behind the wall. Occasionally, travelers or traders might pass by, their presence a reminder that the wall was also part of the daily rhythm of life, not only a barrier. In moments of peace, soldiers could take comfort in the quiet beauty surrounding them. Mountains rose like gentle guardians, rivers glimmered in the sunlight, and the wall stretched endlessly, a ribbon of human effort meeting the natural world. Yet even during calm times, the responsibility of vigilance remained. The stories of these soldiers are quiet tales of patience, endurance, and subtle heroism. They remind us that history is not only built by emperors and rulers, but also by those who stand watch, day after day, in the silence and stillness of the world. And so, across valleys and ridges, the soldiers continued their quiet duty, shaping the human experience of the Great Wall, one watchful day at a time. The Great Wall, while built primarily for defense, quietly influenced life beyond protection. It became a guide, a marker across the vast lands, helping travelers navigate unfamiliar terrain. Merchants moving along trade routes often passed near its stone and earth, finding their way by following its curves over mountains and plains. The wall was not an obstacle to commerce. Rather, it became a companion to journeys, quietly shaping the rhythm of travel. Travelers moving along these routes carried goods like silk, spices, and grains, and their journeys were slow and deliberate. Wagons creaked under heavy loads, pack animals moved steadily along dusty paths, and traders took care to rest near water sources or small villages along the way. In some areas, the wall marked boundaries of safe passage. Travelers knew that on one side lay protection from the settled empire, while beyond its edge, the land could be more unpredictable. Guards along the wall would sometimes guide or warn travelers, offering subtle assistance without interrupting their journey. Another fascinating detail emerges when we consider the movement of information. Messages, letters, and news traveled with traders, connecting distant regions. A farmer in one valley might learn of a distant harvest, or a distant kingdom might hear news of a ruler's decree. The wall acted as both a physical and symbolic guide, showing where human effort met the natural world. Life near these trade routes was shaped by the constant flow of people and goods. Small settlements grew up near gates or accessible stretches of the wall, offering food, shelter, and supplies to weary travelers. Children might watch the comings and goings of merchants, hearing stories of distant lands, while elders would trade news from beyond the horizon. In quiet moments, the wall also served as a landmark, rising from the landscape and offering reassurance that one was still on a familiar path. Soldiers stationed on the wall occasionally interacted with merchants, exchanging news or providing directions. Their presence added both security and rhythm to the movement of people. Historians note that the wall indirectly contributed to the flourishing of trade routes like the Silk Road. By providing a sense of stability along its stretches, it encouraged travel and exchange. Traders moved with more confidence, knowing that sections of the empire were watched and protected. Even in regions far from major cities, the wall offered a quiet form of guidance. Travelers could pause at a watchtower, take in the landscape, and feel connected to the larger empire. Over time, this interaction between the wall, the land, and the movement of people shaped culture. Ideas, crafts, and traditions flowed alongside goods, enriching communities and creating networks of shared knowledge. The wall, while silent, became a participant in this exchange, marking spaces where human lives and natural landscapes met. It served as a backdrop to countless journeys, a steady presence guiding merchants, travelers, and soldiers alike. And so, beyond its role as a defensive structure, the Great Wall quietly shaped the rhythm of life, trade, and travel, linking people across vast distances and allowing stories, goods, and ideas to move slowly but steadily across the heart of the empire. After the unification under Qin Shi Huang, the empire continued to grow, and with that growth came new challenges and new opportunities. The Han Dynasty, which followed several decades later, sought to strengthen the borders and protect the expanding territories. They looked to the walls that had already been built and imagined ways to extend and improve them. During this period, the Great Wall was no longer just a defense. It became part of a broader vision for securing trade routes, settlements, and far-reaching lands. The expansion often followed the same careful pattern as earlier construction. Builders adapted to mountains, rivers, and valleys, shaping each section according to the contours of the land. In some regions, the walls were rebuilt more solidly using layers of tamped earth reinforced with stone or timber. In other areas, new watchtowers were added, rising like quiet sentinels to observe the vast landscapes beyond. Another fascinating detail is the involvement of people from all walks of life. Soldiers, laborers, and even convicts contributed to the construction. Families sometimes moved with workers to support them, carrying food, supplies, and comfort across distant sites. The scale of the work was enormous, and yet there was a rhythm to it. Day by day, section by section, the wall grew steadily across the northern frontiers. Life for the workers continued to blend hardship with small moments of peace. Early mornings were filled with quiet preparation, the gentle sound of earth being pressed and stone being lifted. As the sun rose, light swept across the uneven surfaces of the wall, highlighting the curves and angles shaped by both labor and land. Soldiers stationed along the wall maintained their posts, observing distant plains and valleys. Fires and smoke continued to carry messages, ensuring that information traveled swiftly even across the vast stretches of territory. For people living nearby, the wall offered both security and guidance. Villages were placed near gates or accessible stretches, providing rest for travelers and creating small communities that thrived alongside the construction. The expansion during the Han Dynasty also strengthened trade and cultural connections. Merchants moving along the Silk Road found that parts of the wall provided reassurance, marking boundaries and offering occasional protection. Ideas and knowledge flowed alongside goods, enriching local communities and connecting distant regions of the empire. In quiet moments, when the wind swept over high ridges and the sun dipped behind mountains, the wall appeared like a gentle ribbon stretching across the earth. It was not just a human creation, but a reflection of patience, adaptation, and the merging of human effort with natural landscapes. The Han expansion reminds us that the Great Wall was never a single, static structure. It evolved over centuries, growing with the empire and the people who maintained it. Each stone and layer of earth carried the memory of those who labored quietly, contributing to something far greater than themselves. And so, the wall continued to rise, marking the boundaries of an empire while quietly weaving together human ambition, nature's influence, and the daily lives of those who lived near it. Beyond the stretches of the Great Wall, the lands opened into wide plains, rolling hills, and distant steppes where nomadic tribes roamed. These groups lived in a world very different from the settled farmers and townspeople behind the wall. They moved with the seasons, following herds of animals, and carried their homes with them in the form of tents or portable structures. The wall was meant to offer protection from sudden raids and invasions, but it was not a complete barrier. Soldiers and governors understood that diplomacy, trade, and careful observation were also needed to maintain peace along these borders. Another fascinating detail appears when we consider the interactions between the wall's defenders and the nomadic tribes. Sometimes they exchanged gifts, traded goods, or shared knowledge about the land and its resources. Horses, furs, and grains moved slowly between the two worlds, connecting the settled and nomadic populations in subtle ways. Yet there were also times of tension. Raiders might attempt to cross weak sections of the wall or to find paths through valleys and mountains that were less defended. In response, soldiers relied on watchtowers, patrols, and signal fires to prepare for potential threats. Life along the wall was shaped by this constant awareness of the world beyond. Every morning, guards would scan the horizon, noting the movement of clouds, dust, or animals. At night, the flickering of fire and smoke carried messages to neighboring towers, warning of distant activity. For workers building the wall, the presence of nomadic tribes added both caution and perspective. The empire they were helping protect was vast and connected, yet it touched a world that moved freely and unpredictably. In quiet moments, soldiers might watch the sun rise over distant steppes and reflect on the resilience of these roaming communities, whose lives were intertwined with the rhythms of nature rather than the boundaries of stone. Settlers living near the wall also adjusted their routines according to these interactions. Markets occasionally received goods from nomadic traders, and festivals sometimes included elements inspired by their culture. Children learned stories of distant riders crossing open lands, and elders shared wisdom about coexisting with neighbors who followed entirely different ways of life. The Great Wall, in this way, became not only a defensive structure, but also a boundary that fostered understanding, observation, and adaptation. It shaped how people perceived the world outside their immediate homes, reminding them of both danger and opportunity. Over time, the wall helped stabilize these interactions, providing space for negotiation and protection while also marking the edge of settled territories. The quiet strength of the wall was in its presence, a line that encouraged vigilance without constant conflict, and a structure that allowed communities to grow safely along its stretches. And so, the encounters with nomadic tribes became an enduring part of the wall's history. They reflect the delicate balance between protection and coexistence, showing how human societies adapted to both neighbors and the vast, open world beyond the boundaries of stone and earth. The Great Wall was never just a single-purpose structure. Over centuries, its role evolved quietly, reflecting the changing needs of the empire and the people who lived alongside it. In its earliest forms, the wall was primarily a defense against external threats. It marked boundaries and slowed the movements of armies or raiders. Soldiers patrolled its stretches, watchtowers relayed signals, and the presence of the wall itself offered reassurance to those within its reach. Yet, as time passed, other functions quietly emerged. The wall began to serve as a tool of control, helping authorities manage borders and regulate the movement of people. Gates allowed passage for travelers and traders, but only under certain rules. Officials stationed along these points could monitor who entered or left, ensuring that the empire maintained order while still allowing life to flow along established paths. Another fascinating detail appears when we consider communication. The wall acted as a long, connected network that could quickly carry messages across vast distances. Smoke signals, fires, and later more complex systems ensured that news of danger or important events traveled swiftly from one end to another. This quiet network became just as important as the wall itself. Life near the wall also reflected its changing purpose. Villages, markets, and small towns developed along its stretches, blending protection with opportunity. People could trade safely, travel more confidently, and organize festivals or gatherings without the constant fear of raids. Soldiers, meanwhile, adapted to these quieter roles. In addition to defending the borders, they sometimes oversaw trade, maintained infrastructure, and helped enforce laws. Nights remained calm, punctuated by watchful signals and the distant sounds of the surrounding land. Historians note that the wall's evolving purpose also influenced construction. Certain sections were reinforced not solely for defense, but to manage trade routes or control migration. In some areas, walls were rebuilt higher or with stronger materials, reflecting the shifting priorities of emperors and local governors. In another corner of the past, the wall even took on a symbolic role. It represented unity, endurance, and the careful attention of those who ruled and built the empire. Its presence could inspire confidence, reminding people that they were part of something larger than themselves. The slow transformation of the wall's function also mirrors the lives of those who lived with it. Daily routines adapted to its presence. Families, soldiers, and traders all adjusted their rhythms in harmony with the barriers, gates, and signals that defined the landscape. Nature continued to interact with the wall as well. Sections built for practical defense gradually merged with the surrounding land over time, showing that even great structures are not immune to the quiet persistence of wind, rain, and erosion. And yet, despite these changes, the core essence of the wall remained, a line connecting people, protecting settlements, and observing the world beyond. It quietly shaped life, travel, trade, and governance, all while standing as a witness to centuries of human effort. Over time, the Great Wall became more than a simple defense. It became a living, changing presence in the landscape, adapting to the shifting needs of empires, the rhythms of daily life, and the quiet passage of time itself. Life along the Great Wall was not only about soldiers and laborers, it was also about the rhythm of ordinary days for those who lived nearby. Villages and small settlements often grew close to the wall, taking advantage of its protection while also relying on its presence as a guide through the vast landscapes. Farmers worked steadily in their fields, planting grains like millet and wheat, tending to animals, and following the natural rhythms of the seasons. The wall itself became part of the daily landscape, a quiet reminder of order and stability. Children played in its shadows, running along smaller sections or climbing gentle slopes under the watchful eyes of elders. The sound of their laughter mingled with the soft wind moving across the hills, creating a serene backdrop to the stone and earth structures that stretched across the horizon. Another fascinating detail appears in the way markets and trade developed near the wall. Small shops and stalls emerged close to gates or accessible sections, offering food, tools, textiles, and other necessities. Travelers and merchants passing along trade routes found both safety and convenience, creating a subtle rhythm of exchange that connected villages to distant towns and regions. Soldiers stationed along the wall also shaped daily life in quiet ways. Their presence offered reassurance to those living nearby, while their routines added structure to the surrounding communities. Patrols, signals, and watchtower duties became part of the gentle background of everyday existence, blending defense with normalcy. Nights along the wall were often calm and reflective. Families gathered near fires, sharing simple meals and telling stories of distant lands or past events. The flicker of lanterns and torches added warmth to the cool night air, while stars shone brightly over the sweeping plains and mountain ridges. The wall, in its quiet presence, seemed to hold time and place, connecting generations through the shared experience of living nearby. Nature also played a part in this daily rhythm. The wind moved steadily across ridges, birds traveled in arcs above the wall, and the changing seasons left their gentle marks on both the land and the structure itself. In spring, fresh green shoots appeared along slopes. In autumn, golden hues blanketed the fields, and in winter, frost and snow sometimes softened the lines of the wall, giving it a calm, quiet beauty. People adapted to this rhythm, learning to live in harmony with the land and the wall that guided them. Daily life, though simple by modern standards, was rich with quiet observation, subtle interactions, and a gentle awareness of the broader world. And so, the Great Wall became more than a line of defense. It became a companion to everyday life. It shaped the way people moved, worked, and connected with one another, offering both security and a sense of continuity across generations. The rhythm of labor, play, trade, and observation created a steady, soothing pulse along the wall, blending human life with the quiet persistence of the land. Over time, this harmony became part of the enduring story of the Great Wall, a tale not only of stone and earth, but of the people whose lives unfolded beside it. The Great Wall winds through landscapes that change quietly and continuously, moving from rocky mountains to gentle valleys and open plains. Each curve, bend, and slope reflects both the determination of the builders and the natural contours of the land. In mountainous regions, the wall rises steeply, climbing ridges with careful precision. Workers carried heavy stones and packed earth up these slopes, layer by layer, forming barriers that seemed to grow directly from the cliffs themselves. The process required patience and strength, as each section had to adapt to uneven ground and shifting weather. Valleys offered a different rhythm. Here, the wall stretches more gently, following the lowlands while still maintaining strategic oversight. Watchtowers punctuate the quiet expanses, rising above fields and rivers, giving soldiers a vantage point to observe distant movement. These gentle slopes allowed easier transport of materials, but builders still needed to account for rivers, soil types, and occasional flooding. Another fascinating detail appears when considering how the wall navigates hills. Rather than cutting through or flattening the terrain, it curves gracefully, moving along natural ridges or contours. This careful alignment made construction more sustainable and visually harmonious. From a distance, these curves resemble the flow of a river or the slow motion of a dragon stretching across the land, blending human design with natural beauty. Life along these mountainous and valley stretches was shaped by both challenge and tranquility. Soldiers stationed on high ridges faced cold winds and thin air, yet the quiet beauty of the sunrise over distant peaks offered small moments of reflection. Villagers nearby adapted their lives to the presence of the wall, planting crops along slopes and traveling along paths guided by its line. The wall also interacts subtly with the environment. In some places, vegetation grows along its base, softening the edges and blending the structure with the surrounding land. Snow in winter can blanket it gently, creating a silent, white ribbon across the hills, while mist in spring adds a dreamy quality to its contours. In another corner of the past, the curves of the wall also affected strategy. Soldiers used the natural shape of the land to their advantage, positioning towers on elevated points and reinforcing vulnerable low sections. The wall's alignment with the terrain reduced the effort required to defend it, while enhancing its watchful presence. The quiet interaction between human construction and the land's form is one of the Great Wall's most enduring features. Every slope, bend, and ridge shows an understanding of the world and a respect for its limits. Builders did not fight the land. They worked with it, creating a structure that flows gently across time and space. And so, as the wall climbs mountains, dips into valleys, and stretches across plains, it tells a story of adaptation, patience, and quiet endurance. Its curves are not only practical, but also serene, a reflection of the thoughtful harmony between human effort and the natural world. The Great Wall moves with the land as much as it stands against it, forming a living path through history, shaped by hands, wind, and stone, whispering the calm persistence of generations long past. The builders of the Great Wall relied on techniques that were both simple and remarkably effective, allowing them to create a structure that could endure for centuries. In many regions, rammed earth was the primary method. Loose soil was layered into wooden frames and then pressed down repeatedly until it became compact and strong. This process was slow, demanding patience and steady rhythm, but the result was surprisingly durable. In areas where stone was plentiful, workers shaped and stacked rocks to form walls and towers. Stone required careful placement to maintain balance and strength, but it provided greater resistance to erosion and the effects of time. Timber was also used, often to reinforce structures or to create frames for earth-filled walls. In some places, mud bricks were baked in the sun or in kilns, forming a smooth surface that could withstand wind and rain. Each technique reflected the materials available and the local geography, creating a wall that was uniquely adapted to its surroundings. Another fascinating detail emerges when we consider the workers themselves. Laborers included soldiers, peasants, and sometimes convicts, all brought together for the task. They worked in teams, learning from one another, passing knowledge down quietly from one generation of builders to the next. Days began with the first light of dawn. Tools clinked softly as they dug, lifted, and shaped earth and stone. The sun warmed the earth, casting long shadows across the stretches of the wall, and the rhythm of movement, pressing, lifting, stacking, created a quiet pulse that echoed through valleys and across ridges. Life was demanding, yet it also carried moments of reflection. Workers might pause to watch clouds drift across mountains, listen to distant rivers, or feel the wind sweeping over the hills. Each layer of earth and stone was not only a contribution to the wall, but also a small act of endurance and care. Maintenance became a quiet, ongoing task. Weather, erosion, and natural shifts required repairs and reinforcement. Soldiers and local communities often participated in these efforts, ensuring that the wall continued to serve its purpose and remain connected along vast distances. In remote sections, laborers sometimes lived in temporary camps, blending their lives with the surrounding land. Nights were spent under the open sky, listening to the soft whispers of the wind or sharing small meals with companions. In these moments, the magnitude of their work could be felt, the wall stretching far beyond their sight, a ribbon of effort crossing mountains, rivers, and plains. Historians note that the construction techniques reflect both innovation and adaptation. Builders worked with what the land provided, crafting a structure that could endure harsh winters, scorching summers, and the slow passage of time. And so, the Great Wall stands today, not just as a physical boundary, but as a testament to centuries of careful labor, quiet skill, and human determination. Each brick, stone, and layer of earth tells a story of people working in harmony with one another and with the land itself, building something that moves gently through history while shaping the lives around it. The Great Wall was more than a physical barrier. It was also a living network of communication, designed to relay information quickly across vast distances. Watchtowers, placed at intervals along the wall, acted as points where messages could be sent and received. During the day, guards used smoke to signal warnings. Rising clouds of smoke would drift across the mountains and valleys, each pattern carrying a meaning that neighboring towers understood. At night, fires served the same purpose. The flickering glow could be seen for miles, a quiet signal that something important required attention. Soldiers were trained to observe carefully. They watched the horizon, reading the movement of dust, shadows, or distant riders, ready to alert others if anything unusual appeared. The network of towers created a chain of observation, linking stretches of the wall that could be hundreds of miles apart. Another fascinating detail lies in the timing and precision of these signals. Smoke had to be visible but not too dense. Fire had to burn brightly without spreading beyond control. And the sequence of messages required careful coordination. Even a small mistake could delay communication, so attention to detail was essential. Life for the soldiers involved in this system was steady yet attentive. Long hours of observation were punctuated by brief, decisive actions, lighting a signal, observing a distant ridge, or checking on supplies. This rhythm demanded patience and focus, qualities that quietly shaped the experience of life along the wall. Beyond warnings of raids or attacks, signals also carried other forms of information. Messages about troop movements, supplies, or administrative announcements traveled along the wall, connecting distant regions and maintaining the coordination of the empire. The system was subtle but effective, relying entirely on human observation and skill, combined with simple tools like fire, smoke, and flags. In quiet moments, the towers themselves became almost meditative spaces. Soldiers could watch the changing light of sunrise or sunset, the movement of clouds across valleys, or the slow arc of birds flying overhead. Signals became part of this gentle rhythm, a language of movement and light that connected people across distances without disturbing the natural calm of the surroundings. Historians often highlight the ingenuity of this system. Without modern communication, the Great Wall created one of the most effective long-distance networks of its time. Messages could travel far faster than a messenger on horseback alone, bridging hundreds of miles with precision and reliability. The wall's role as a communication system also strengthened its symbolic meaning. It was not just a defense, it was a structure that connected people, organized information, and allowed communities to respond together to distant events. And so, from the quiet flicker of fire to the rising smoke drifting across mountains, the Great Wall functioned as a living, breathing network. Each signal was a small pulse of human ingenuity, linking soldiers, workers, and communities, and shaping the way people experienced time, distance, and the subtle rhythms of life along this immense structure. Over the centuries, the Great Wall witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties, each leaving subtle marks on its stones and earth. As one ruler passed and another took power, priorities shifted, and sections of the wall were repaired, rebuilt, or expanded according to new needs. Some dynasties focused on strengthening defenses, adding towers, or thickening vulnerable stretches, while others emphasized trade and communication, ensuring that the wall supported travel and messages as much as protection. Life along the wall adjusted quietly with each change. Soldiers learned new routines, overseers followed updated orders, and nearby communities adapted to shifting borders or regulations. Another fascinating detail emerges when considering how dynasties interacted with the wall's maintenance. In some periods, thousands of laborers were brought in to repair damaged sections after storms or erosion, demonstrating a persistent respect for the structure's strategic and symbolic importance. During times of peace, fewer repairs were needed, allowing workers and soldiers moments of quiet reflection. Villages thrived nearby, markets flourished, and the wall became a backdrop for daily life rather than a line of constant defense. In contrast, during periods of tension or conflict, activity along the wall increased. Soldiers patrolled more frequently, watchtowers were staffed more heavily, and repairs were prioritized. The wall's presence became both a shield and a reminder of vigilance, shaping how people moved, farmed, and traveled along its stretches. Yet, no matter which dynasty ruled, the wall maintained a quiet constancy. Its stones and earthen layers absorbed the passage of time, holding the echoes of countless generations who had labored to build, guard, and adapt it. In another corner of history, the wall also served as a marker of authority. Dynasties used it to assert control over borders, signaling to neighboring regions that the empire was organized and watchful. At the same time, the wall provided stability for those living nearby. Families could farm and trade with confidence, knowing that the structure offered protection and guidance, even as rulers changed. Soldiers stationed along the wall became witnesses to history itself, observing shifts in leadership, receiving new orders, and adjusting to evolving strategies. They were quiet participants in the ongoing story, their daily routines intertwined with the rhythms of dynastic change. The wall also adapted physically with each new period. Sections were reinforced with stronger materials, walls were rerouted to take advantage of natural defenses, and watchtowers were redesigned to improve observation and signaling. These subtle changes reflected both technological advances and evolving strategies, while still maintaining the quiet continuity that gave the wall its enduring presence. Over time, the Great Wall became a living record of China's dynastic history. Each curve, each stone, and each layer of earth told a story of rulers and laborers, soldiers and villagers, all contributing to the evolving landscape of human effort. It remained both practical and symbolic, standing as a testament to the passage of centuries and the quiet persistence of those who built, guarded, and lived beside it. Even as dynasties rose and fell, the wall endured, weaving together time, labor, and landscape into a continuous, gentle presence that shaped life along its endless stretches. Beyond its physical presence, the Great Wall gradually became a symbol, quietly carrying meaning for the people who lived near it, and for generations far beyond. To those behind its stretches, it represented security and order, a boundary that separated the familiar lands of the empire from the uncertain world beyond. Families looked at its curves across distant hills and valleys and felt a sense of reassurance, knowing that soldiers watched over the borders and that danger would not come suddenly. At the same time, the wall also symbolized human perseverance. The labor of countless individuals, soldiers, peasants, convicts, and artisans was embedded in every stone, every tamped layer of earth, and every watchtower. Their steady, patient work over years and decades created something far larger than themselves, a lasting presence that shaped landscapes and lives alike. Another fascinating detail appears when considering the wall's role in stories and culture. Poets, historians, and travelers often wrote of its grandeur, describing not only its scale but also the dedication it represented. Tales of soldiers standing watch against winds and snow, of laborers climbing mountains with baskets of earth, or of villagers thriving beside its gates, all contributed to the quiet mythology of the wall. Even when dynasties changed, the wall remained a constant, connecting people across time and place. Its presence reminded everyone that the labor of the past still influenced the present. Life along the wall reinforced its symbolic power. Daily routines, farmers tending fields, children playing in its shadows, merchants passing through its gates, created a living backdrop to the structure's enduring meaning. Soldiers on patrol, watchtowers lit by fire at night, and signals of smoke during the day all emphasized vigilance, diligence, and care. These rhythms, repeated quietly over generations, strengthened the perception of the wall as more than just a barrier. Nature itself contributed to the symbolism. When snow blanketed its ridges, the wall seemed to float across mountains like a gentle ribbon. When the wind swept through valleys, its curves echoed the patterns of the hills and ridges it followed. These moments of quiet beauty made the wall feel alive, a participant in the world it guarded rather than just a static structure. In some ways, the Great Wall also became a bridge between the human and the natural. Its builders worked with the land, adapting to its slopes, ridges, and valleys, creating harmony between effort and environment. This quiet integration reinforced its symbolic meaning, showing that human endeavor and nature could coexist in balance. Historians today reflect on the wall's dual role, practical and symbolic. While it defended borders and regulated movement, it also carried the memory of generations who labored, observed, and adapted alongside it. Its presence inspired confidence, represented unity, and reminded all who saw it of the persistence of human effort over time. And so, the Great Wall stands not only as a physical monument, but also as a silent storyteller, its curves, towers, and stretches conveying lessons of vigilance, patience, and quiet endurance. It tells of people who lived, worked, and dreamed beside it, and it continues to echo across centuries as a symbol of human determination and the subtle beauty of history. Life along the Great Wall was shaped not only by labor and vigilance, but also by the quiet rhythms of basic survival. Soldiers, laborers, and villagers needed food, shelter, and other daily necessities to sustain themselves across the vast and often remote stretches of the wall. In some regions, small villages developed near accessible sections, offering supplies and a sense of community. Farmers grew grains such as millet, wheat, and barley, providing steady meals for those living and working nearby. Livestock like goats, sheep, and cattle supplemented their diet, offering milk, meat, and labor for carrying heavy loads. Another fascinating detail lies in how these provisions were transported and stored. Supplies were often carried on pack animals or in simple carts along paths that followed the curves of the wall. Food was stored in basic granaries near villages or at military posts, ensuring that even distant stretches had access to sustenance during long periods of labor or observation. Soldiers stationed at watchtowers sometimes lived in simple rooms or temporary shelters, their homes blending with the structure itself. Roofs made of timber or tile offered protection from rain, wind, and snow, while small hearths provided warmth during cold nights. Daily routines were structured around meals, rest, and duty. In the early morning, workers might gather together to share a quiet breakfast before beginning their tasks. Meals were simple, often consisting of grains, vegetables, and occasional meat. Evenings allowed for reflection or storytelling, moments that were calm and restorative after long hours of work. Water was another essential element. Wells, rivers, and streams were relied upon both by villagers and by soldiers. Careful attention to hydration and hygiene was critical in sustaining life along stretches of the wall, especially in arid or mountainous regions. In some areas, temporary camps were established to house laborers during construction projects. Tents or simple wooden shelters offered protection, while communal spaces allowed workers to prepare meals, share news, and rest together. Life in these camps was hard yet rhythmical, shaped by the rising and setting of the sun and the gentle cadence of labor. Children living near the wall experienced a blend of work and play. While adults focused on survival and construction, young ones explored the landscape, often learning about agriculture, trade, and navigation from older family members. Their laughter and curiosity added a quiet vibrancy to otherwise calm or strenuous days. Another important detail is the role of merchants. Traveling along trade routes that followed parts of the wall, they brought additional food, tools, and goods that were otherwise difficult to obtain locally. This exchange subtly connected remote stretches of the wall to distant regions of the empire. And so, daily life along the Great Wall was not only about construction, defense, or observation, it was also about survival and community. Food, shelter, and the quiet rhythms of care allowed people to endure long days, harsh weather, and demanding labor. These necessities became part of the gentle story of human life intertwined with the wall, creating a foundation for persistence, cooperation, and the subtle beauty of daily existence in the shadow of this immense structure. Life along the Great Wall was shaped not only by human effort, but also by the quiet persistence of the seasons. Winter, in particular, brought challenges that tested the endurance of soldiers, laborers, and nearby villagers. Snow would blanket the mountains and plains, softening the edges of the wall and transforming it into a quiet, white ribbon stretching across the landscape. The wind cut sharply through watchtowers and valleys, carrying the scent of frost and the distant echo of movement across hills. Soldiers stationed in these remote towers faced long, cold hours of observation. Thick layers of clothing, small fires, and careful positioning within towers became essential to survive the freezing temperatures. They often moved slowly, conserving energy, while their eyes remained alert, watching for signs of travel or potential threats across the snow-covered terrain. Another fascinating detail appears when we consider the laborers who maintained or repaired sections of the wall during these months. Construction slowed, yet work did not stop entirely. Snow and frost made moving materials more difficult, and paths that were easy in warmer months became treacherous. Yet there was also a quiet beauty to the labor. The wall, dusted in white, glimmered softly under the pale winter sun, and the rhythmic pounding of tools echoed faintly across silent valleys. Villages near the wall adapted as well. Families layered homes with extra warmth, stored food for longer periods, and tended to livestock with careful attention to shelter and grazing. Fires became central to daily life, offering both warmth and a gathering place for quiet conversation. The snow also transformed travel. Paths that were familiar became unfamiliar, and merchants or travelers had to move slowly and cautiously. Signals along the wall, like smoke during the day or small fires at night, were adapted to the weather. Sometimes smoke could not rise clearly, or snow would obscure the glow of distant fires. Soldiers developed new rhythms, adjusting timing and methods to ensure that communication and vigilance continued even under harsh conditions. In quiet moments, observers could watch snowflakes drifting across towers, swirling in gentle patterns and covering the rough stone and packed earth of the wall. The landscape became softer, calmer, almost dreamlike, even as the work of survival and defense continued. These winters created a rhythm of endurance. Each season demanded adaptation, patience, and careful observation, yet also offered moments of stillness and reflection. Travelers and villagers alike learned to read the weather, predict changes, and move with the natural flow of the world. Over time, the interplay of harsh winters and quiet beauty shaped the lives of everyone near the wall. Soldiers, laborers, merchants, and families all adjusted to the rhythm of the cold months, blending effort with observation, resilience with reflection. And so, through snow, frost, and winter winds, the Great Wall remained a steady presence, silently watching over the land, guiding those who lived beside it, and teaching lessons of endurance, patience, and the quiet passage of time across both stone and snow. As winter faded, the arrival of summer brought its own quiet challenges to life along the Great Wall. The sun would rise early, casting warm, golden light across the earth and stone, and the heat could be relentless, especially in stretches that crossed open plains or lowlands. Soldiers, laborers, and villagers alike had to adjust their daily rhythms to cope with the warmth. Early mornings were often the most active hours, when work could proceed before the sun reached its peak. Laborers carried earth and stone, repaired sections of the wall, and maintained watchtowers in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The work required care, for heavy materials and hot weather demanded steady pacing and frequent rests. Another fascinating detail appears in how the builders protected themselves from the sun. Simple methods, such as wide-brimmed hats, cloth wraps, and strategically placed shaded areas, helped reduce fatigue. Water became essential, carried from nearby wells, rivers, or streams, and soldiers often coordinated the timing of patrols to ensure hydration and endurance. Villages near the wall adapted as well. Crops thrived under the summer sun, offering grains and vegetables to sustain the local population and the workers who passed through. Livestock grazed in green pastures, and children played more actively, their laughter mingling with the sounds of distant construction or the quiet sweep of wind over the wall. The heat also influenced travel and trade. Merchants moving along routes near the wall adjusted their schedules, traveling in cooler hours or taking longer rests during the hottest part of the day. Watchtowers served as both protection and guidance, offering shade, shelter, and reassurance that help was nearby if needed. Nature contributed to the rhythm of summer life. The wind provided relief in mountain passes, while distant clouds signaled approaching rain or thunderstorms. When rain came, it cooled the earth, softened the paths, and sometimes made repairs more difficult. Yet the builders adapted, layering earth and stone carefully to withstand the changing conditions. The wall itself seemed to breathe with the season. Its surfaces radiated heat, its shadows stretched longer in the afternoon sun, and its curves reflected the golden light across valleys and ridges. Soldiers and laborers could pause for a quiet moment, watching the shifting colors and noticing the gentle movement of clouds across the horizon. Historians note that summer also required careful coordination for signals and communication. Smoke during the day could be harder to see in bright sunlight, while fires at night became a more important means of passing messages along distant towers. These adaptations, small and deliberate, ensured that the wall's purpose, protection, communication, and guidance remained uninterrupted despite the seasonal challenges. And so, summer brought both difficulty and beauty to life along the Great Wall. The heat tested endurance, encouraged innovation, and shaped the rhythm of daily work, travel, and observation. Through the long, sunlit days, the wall remained a steady companion, guiding communities, connecting soldiers, and witnessing the quiet persistence of human effort in harmony with the natural world. The Great Wall was not only a structure of stone and earth, but also a quiet companion to the lives of the communities that settled along its stretches. Villages often grew near gates or accessible sections, where the presence of the wall provided both security and guidance. People relied on it as a landmark, a point of reference in a vast and sometimes challenging landscape. Farmers planted crops near its base, taking advantage of the slightly elevated land for drainage and protection from floods. Their days followed gentle rhythms from the soft light of dawn through the warmth of midday labor to the calm of evening as shadows stretched across the wall. Another fascinating detail is how local markets flourished alongside the wall. Merchants traveling through would stop at these communities, exchanging grains, textiles, tools, and sometimes even stories from distant lands. Villages provided food, shelter, and guidance, forming quiet networks that connected settlements to the broader empire. Soldiers stationed along the wall became an integral part of these communities. Their presence offered reassurance, but it also added rhythm to daily life. Patrols, signals, and maintenance tasks were intertwined with the everyday activities of nearby residents. In return, villagers often helped supply provisions, repair small sections of the wall, or assist travelers passing through. Children grew up with the wall as a backdrop to their play, climbing gentle slopes, exploring watchtowers, and learning about the structure's history and purpose from elders. These interactions created a subtle, ongoing dialogue between human life and the imposing structure that stretched across the landscape. Nature, too, shaped the life of these communities. Winds swept through mountain passes, rivers nourished fields, and seasonal changes marked the passing of time. Winter brought quiet reflection as snow softened the wall's lines. Summer offered warmth and opportunity for work and travel. The wall's presence influenced how communities adapted to these rhythms. Villagers learned to anticipate the patterns of weather and labor, to coordinate planting and harvesting with the needs of soldiers, and to maintain a balance between the natural world and the built environment. In another corner of daily life, festivals and gatherings often incorporated the wall into their stories and rituals. Songs, dances, and tales celebrated the labor of builders and the watchfulness of soldiers, embedding the wall into cultural memory. Even as dynasties changed and priorities shifted, the communities continued to grow alongside it, sustaining traditions and routines quietly intertwined with its presence. The Great Wall, in this way, became more than a defensive structure. It was a silent participant in the rhythms of human life. It guided, protected, and connected, offering stability and a gentle sense of continuity across generations. People, soldiers, and travelers all shaped their lives around it, creating a network of subtle interactions that allowed communities to thrive. And so, the wall became both a witness to and a part of daily existence, quietly marking the passage of time and the enduring connection between humans, labor, and the land. Its stones and earth tell stories not only of strategy and defense, but also of ordinary lives lived alongside something extraordinary. The Great Wall, while serving as a protective barrier, also became a quiet conduit for cultural exchange. Along its stretches, traders, travelers, and soldiers moved not only goods, but also ideas, traditions, and stories. Villages near the wall often welcomed merchants who brought textiles, spices, and crafts from distant regions. In return, local communities shared their own produce, tools, and customs, creating a gentle rhythm of exchange that wove together the human experience across miles of stone and earth. Another fascinating detail lies in the blending of language and stories. Travelers passing along trade routes shared tales of lands far away, of deserts, mountains, and distant cities. Children in villages listened eagerly, repeating these stories and imagining worlds beyond their own. Elders, meanwhile, preserved wisdom passed down through generations, integrating it subtly with the new ideas arriving from travelers. Soldiers stationed along the wall also played a role in this cultural flow. They sometimes interacted with passing merchants, relaying information about local conditions, observing foreign practices, or learning new techniques in agriculture or craft. Their presence allowed both observation and exchange to occur safely, bridging communities and distant travelers. Life along the wall was therefore a blend of protection, work, and quiet learning. seasonal changes influenced how goods and ideas moved. In summer, trade routes were more active, as travelers could move easily across plains and mountains. In winter, exchanges slowed, but careful preparation ensured that critical supplies and information continued to pass between communities. The wall itself served as a physical guide, marking paths that travelers could follow with confidence. Watchtowers and signal points not only ensured safety, but also helped maintain order, allowing merchants to move goods without fear of getting lost or encountering unexpected danger. Over time, this subtle movement of culture shaped the communities living near the wall. Local festivals, crafts, and cuisine began to reflect influences from travelers who had passed through centuries before. Markets carried goods that originated hundreds of miles away, quietly reminding villagers of the wider world beyond their own fields and homes. In quiet moments, soldiers and villagers alike could observe the distant peaks and valleys, imagining the lands where these goods and ideas originated. Nature contributed to this rhythm of exchange as well. Winds carried the sounds of distant activity, rivers offered routes for travel, and the changing seasons dictated the pace at which goods and knowledge could move. The Great Wall, while static in form, became dynamic in influence, shaping not only defense and daily life, but also the flow of human thought, skill, and imagination. Its presence facilitated connections across communities, allowing people to learn, adapt, and grow in quiet ways that did not require confrontation or conflict. And so, the wall stands as more than a military structure. It is a bridge between cultures, a pathway for ideas, and a silent witness to the gentle exchange of human creativity, wisdom, and curiosity. Through the centuries, its stones and earth have quietly held the echoes of countless stories, carrying them across time as they shaped the lives of all who lived along or traveled near its stretches. The Great Wall, while built primarily for defense, became a quiet companion to trade across northern China. Merchants moving along established routes often used the wall as a guide, following its curves through mountains, hills, and valleys. The presence of the wall offered reassurance, signaling that settlements, watchtowers, and gates were nearby, and that human vigilance helped protect travelers along the way. Villages grew near these routes, providing food, shelter, and supplies to traders carrying textiles, grains, and other goods. In some regions, small markets developed specifically to serve travelers moving along the wall. Another fascinating detail emerges when we consider the rhythm of commerce. Travel was slow and deliberate, paced by the limits of human and animal endurance. Caravans moved steadily, resting at midday, stopping near water sources, and timing journeys according to the rising and setting sun. The wall's presence marked a familiar path, guiding merchants safely across stretches of otherwise open and potentially hazardous land. Soldiers stationed along the wall sometimes assisted travelers, providing directions, warning of difficult terrain, or relaying messages about the weather and conditions further along the route. Their quiet observation added to the sense of security, allowing commerce to continue steadily even in remote stretches. Nature shaped the experience of travel as well. Rivers crossed the path of the wall, requiring small ferries or bridges. Hills and ridges demanded careful climbing, while forests offered shade and a source of timber for repairs or fuel. travelers became attuned to these rhythms, adjusting their pace and methods according to the land, seasons, and weather. Over time, these trade routes fostered subtle connections between communities. Villagers along the wall could learn of innovations, practices, or products from distant lands. Knowledge of new farming techniques, crafts, or stories from other regions moved alongside the physical goods, quietly enriching local life. Another interesting aspect is how the wall indirectly influenced the layout of commerce. Gates and watchtowers became natural stopping points, and settlements often emerged in these locations. Merchants and travelers relied on these points for rest, resupply, and social exchange. Markets near gates became hubs of quiet activity, connecting the rhythms of life along the wall to the broader movements of trade across the empire. The seasons influenced trade as well. In summer, paths were more accessible, rivers were navigable, and travel was more comfortable. In winter, movement slowed, snow-blanketed valleys, and caravans relied more on local resources for sustenance and safety. Soldiers, villagers, and merchants adapted together to this changing rhythm, maintaining a quiet balance between work, travel, and survival. And so, the Great Wall was more than a barrier. It was a guide, a framework, and a stabilizing presence for the flow of trade. Its curves and towers shaped the movement of people, goods, and knowledge, linking communities across vast distances. The wall's enduring presence reminds us that even in a world built for defense, human life, commerce, and connection find ways to coexist, quietly shaping history along its long, winding path. The Great Wall is often thought of as a barrier of stone and earth, but it is also a tapestry of human experience, woven from the lives of countless soldiers who stood watch along its ridges. These men formed the quiet heartbeat of the wall, observing distant valleys, maintaining towers, and ensuring that the empire's borders remained secure. Their days followed a deliberate rhythm. Early mornings began with inspection and preparation, followed by hours of careful observation, repairs, and sometimes training. Each watchtower became a small world of its own, providing shelter, storage, and a vantage point over vast stretches of land. Another fascinating detail emerges in the ways soldiers communicated. Signals of smoke during the day and fire at night carried messages across miles of wall, allowing distant posts to respond quickly to potential threats. This required not only vigilance, but also a subtle understanding of timing, wind, and light. Soldiers learned to read the landscape as well as the signals, noting the movement of clouds, dust, or distant riders. Life in the watchtowers was both isolating and meditative. The quiet allowed for observation, reflection, and subtle learning. Soldiers became intimately familiar with the patterns of nature, how the sun rose and set behind specific peaks, how winds shifted across valleys, or how animals moved along the distant plains. In winter, snow transformed the landscape into a silent, white ribbon, while summer brought warmth and long days of steady labor. Beyond observation, soldiers also interacted with nearby villagers and traveling merchants. These interactions created subtle networks of trust and exchange, allowing communities and posts to support each other. Supplies could be shared, messages relayed, or assistance offered when weather or terrain made travel difficult. The human experience along the wall was also marked by endurance. Long stretches of duty, remote locations, and harsh conditions demanded patience, resilience, and quiet strength. Soldiers developed routines to sustain both body and mind, pacing along parapets, maintaining their towers, repairing earth and stone, or tending small gardens when possible. Even in these distant locations, life found moments of quiet beauty. Sunrises painted ridges in soft gold, distant rivers reflected shimmering light, and the gentle curve of the wall across mountains and valleys offered a constant reminder of human effort intertwined with nature. Stories passed down through generations recall the perseverance of these soldiers, legends of those who stood vigil during storms, who carried messages across dangerous stretches, or who protected communities from raids became part of local culture, quietly reminding future generations of the endurance and dedication required to maintain the wall. And so, the watchtowers of the Great Wall are more than architectural features. They are silent witnesses to human vigilance, guardians of communities, and spaces of quiet reflection. Each tower, each stone, each signal of fire or smoke represents not only a defensive strategy, but also the lives and experiences of those who stood watch. The Great Wall, in this way, is a monument not just to stone and earth, but to the subtle, enduring human presence that shaped its story across centuries, connecting land, people, and history in quiet, persistent harmony. The Great Wall stretches across landscapes of breathtaking beauty, blending human construction with the quiet grandeur of nature. As it winds over mountains, dips into valleys, and stretches across plains, the wall interacts subtly with the environment, creating scenes that have inspired reflection for centuries. In some regions, jagged peaks rise sharply from the earth, and the wall climbs these ridges with careful precision, following natural contours rather than forcing a straight line. The rhythm of these slopes shaped construction techniques, requiring layers of stone and rammed earth to adapt to the incline. Another fascinating detail lies in how the wall coexists with rivers and streams. Bridges, ramps, and earthen reinforcements allowed water to flow naturally while maintaining the structure's integrity. Seasonal changes caused rivers to swell or recede, and builders and soldiers learned to adjust their work and routines according to these gentle variations. Forests also accompany the wall in many areas. Trees provide shade in summer, shelter from wind, and subtle camouflage from distant observation. Birds, small animals, and insects inhabit these woods, creating a quiet, living ecosystem alongside the human-made structure. In winter, the landscape transforms. Snow softens the lines of the wall, blanketing mountains and valleys and creating a serene, almost meditative atmosphere. The silence is punctuated only by the distant call of birds or the subtle movement of animals, reminding those near the wall of the quiet persistence of life. Summer brings warmth, a slower rhythm of observation, and the soft rustling of leaves along ridges and slopes. Travelers and soldiers alike observe these changes, noting patterns in nature that affected movement, construction, and daily life. In another corner of history, the wall also interacts with distant horizons. From high watchtowers, one could see mountains rolling endlessly, rivers snaking through valleys, and the soft haze of faraway plains. These views provided both strategic advantage and moments of quiet reflection, connecting human labor to the vastness of the natural world. The wall's curves often echo natural forms, resembling rivers or the slow motion of a dragon stretched across ridges and hills. This visual harmony creates a sense of unity between human construction and the environment, reinforcing the subtle idea that the wall was not an imposition on the land, but a careful adaptation to it. Nature, in turn, influenced the experience of daily life along the wall. Winds dictated the placement of fires for signaling, snowfall changed travel and patrol patterns, rivers and streams offered water and a quiet, reflective presence. Soldiers and villagers learned to move with these rhythms, adjusting to the subtle pulse of the seasons and the quiet patterns of the land. And so, the Great Wall is not only a monument of human endeavor, but also a participant in the natural world. Its stones and earth rise and fall with mountains, stretch across rivers, and integrate with forests, forming a living dialogue between people and nature. Walking along its curves, observing its ridges, and watching the landscape unfold, one can sense the quiet harmony that emerges when human effort respects and follows the rhythms of the world around it, creating a presence that is both enduring and serene. The Great Wall holds countless hidden stories, whispered through centuries of labor, vigilance, and quiet human life. Each stone, each layer of earth, each weathered tower carries traces of people who built, repaired, and guarded the structure, leaving a legacy that is both tangible and subtle. Soldiers, stationed along remote stretches, left behind small marks of their presence, scratches on beams, carved initials, or tiny offerings to bring good fortune. These small traces offer a glimpse into lives that would otherwise remain invisible, reminding us that history is often found in the quietest details. Another fascinating aspect emerges when considering the journeys of laborers, peasants, artisans, and even prisoners who contributed to construction often traveled great distances, moving along paths that twisted through mountains and valleys. Their experiences were shaped by the rhythm of work, the challenges of terrain, and the seasons, creating personal stories intertwined with the larger narrative of the wall. Villages near the wall also hold hidden histories. Families maintained small shrines or memorials, marking events, remembering loved ones, or celebrating moments of endurance and survival. Markets and trade routes carried tales from distant lands, quietly integrating cultural and historical threads into local life. Life along the wall was punctuated by quiet moments of reflection. Soldiers observing distant ridges, laborers pausing to rest beneath the sun, or villagers watching the walls stretch across the horizon, all contributed to a human connection with the landscape. These experiences are often invisible in records, but leave a subtle imprint on the structure and on memory. Seasonal changes added layers to these stories. Winter brought long hours of stillness, challenging endurance while encouraging introspection. Summer brought warmth and movement, with trade, repairs, and travel forming a steady rhythm of human activity. Nature itself preserves hidden narratives. Footprints, worn paths, and eroded stones trace centuries of passage, silently recording the lives of those who walked along or worked on the wall. Another quiet detail is the way legends and oral histories intertwined with the physical structure. Tales of bravery, endurance, or clever strategy were passed down, blending fact and imagination, creating a cultural memory that enriches the wall beyond its physical presence. Even today, archaeologists and historians uncover traces of these hidden stories, from ancient tools and pottery to fragments of letters or inscriptions. Each discovery deepens our understanding of the human experience tied to the wall, highlighting the ordinary moments that quietly shaped history. And so, the Great Wall is more than an architectural achievement. It is a living archive of countless human experiences. Every stone holds echoes of laborers' hands, soldiers' vigilance, travelers' journeys, and villagers' lives. The structure stands not only as a defense or guide, but also as a keeper of stories that are often hidden, yet enduring. Walking its paths or observing its towers, one can sense the whispers of the past, the quiet persistence of generations, and the subtle interplay between human life and the landscape. The wall teaches that history is not only found in grand events, but also in small, hidden stories that accumulate over time, creating a tapestry of endurance, adaptation, and quiet human presence across centuries. The Great Wall has endured centuries of weather, labor, and the passage of countless people, yet time inevitably leaves its mark. Sections have crumbled, stones have shifted, and earth has eroded. Recognizing the cultural and historical importance of the wall, efforts to restore and preserve it have quietly continued for generations, blending human care with respect for the structure's original form. Restoration work is careful and deliberate. Specialists study the materials and techniques used by ancient builders, replicating the combination of stone, brick, and rammed earth wherever possible. This ensures that repairs are in harmony with existing sections, maintaining the wall's continuity across mountains, valleys, and plains. Another fascinating detail appears in how preservation balances accessibility with protection. Some areas are open to visitors, allowing people to walk along paths and observe watchtowers, while other stretches are protected from heavy traffic, ensuring that fragile sections remain intact for future generations. Local communities often play a role in this process. Villagers who have lived near the wall for generations provide knowledge about past repairs, traditional construction methods, and subtle features that might otherwise be overlooked. Their quiet contributions help maintain both the wall and the stories embedded within it. Preservation also involves environmental awareness. Builders and caretakers consider the effects of rain, wind, and vegetation, reinforcing sections where erosion or plant growth could cause damage. Paths are sometimes redirected to minimize human impact, while natural vegetation is maintained to stabilize soil and integrate with the wall's surroundings. In modern times, historians and archaeologists document discoveries meticulously. Excavations, surveys, and digital mapping allow researchers to understand construction techniques, labor patterns, and the wall's interactions with its environment. These efforts help preserve not just the physical structure, but also the knowledge and history embedded within its stones and earth. Another subtle aspect of restoration is the way it encourages reflection. Visitors and caretakers alike are reminded of the human endurance and skill required to build and maintain such a vast structure. Every repaired stone, every reinforced watchtower, and every restored path is a quiet tribute to generations of laborers, soldiers, and communities who contributed to the wall's story. Seasonal changes continue to influence preservation work. Winter frost, summer rains, and the shifting sun all create challenges for maintaining stability. Caretakers adjust their work to follow the rhythms of the land, blending human effort with natural cycles in a careful, measured manner. Ultimately, restoration and preservation are not merely technical tasks. They are acts of respect, reflection, and continuity. The Great Wall's endurance is a testament to both ancient ingenuity and modern care. It reminds us that history is a living process, requiring attention, patience, and reverence. By maintaining the wall, humans ensure that its stories, labor, and silent witness to centuries of life remain present for generations to come. Walking along these restored stretches, one can feel the continuity of effort across time, the hands that shaped it, the eyes that watched from towers, and the quiet persistence of people who cared enough to preserve it. The Great Wall remains not only a monument of stone and earth, but also a living symbol of endurance, history, and the gentle care that allows human achievement to whisper across centuries. As our journey along the Great Wall nears its quiet conclusion, it is gentle to pause and reflect on what this immense structure represents. Beyond the stones, earth, and watchtowers, the wall is a testament to human persistence, adaptation, and connection. It stretches across mountains, valleys, and plains, silently observing the flow of time and the subtle rhythms of life. Each curve and bend tells a story of labor and care, not only of soldiers and builders, but also of the communities that grew alongside it. Another fascinating detail emerges when considering the passage of centuries. Dynasties rose and fell, borders shifted, and wars came and went, yet the wall endured, quietly absorbing the changes while continuing to guide, protect, and connect those near it. Its permanence contrasts with the fleeting moments of daily life, reminding us of the gentle continuity of human effort across generations. The wall also speaks to the relationship between people and the natural world. Builders adapted their work to mountains, rivers, forests, and valleys, creating a structure that flows with the landscape rather than forcing it into unnatural forms. This harmony allowed the wall to endure not only as a defense, but also as a quiet witness to the beauty and rhythms of nature. Daily life along the wall was shaped by this interaction, whether through the challenges of winter frost, the heat of summer, or the passage of travelers and traders. Soldiers, laborers, and villagers developed routines, exchanged knowledge, and learned to observe both the land and the patterns of human activity, creating a subtle network of connection that extended across miles of stone and earth. Another quiet lesson of the wall lies in its symbolism. Beyond defense, it represents the perseverance of ordinary lives, hands that built, eyes that watched, families that lived alongside, and communities that adapted. These stories are not always recorded in official histories, but they are embedded in the wall itself, in the careful layering of earth, the placement of stones, and the gentle rise and fall of watchtowers along distant ridges. Preservation efforts today continue this quiet legacy. By repairing, maintaining, and documenting the wall, modern caretakers honor both the ingenuity of ancient builders and the countless human experiences tied to its existence. Visitors walking along restored sections feel a sense of continuity, sensing the presence of generations past and the persistence of human endeavor. And so, as we reflect on the Great Wall's legacy, we recognize it as more than a monument or boundary. It is a living story of endurance, adaptation, and quiet connection between people and the land. Its stones hold the echoes of laborers, soldiers, travelers, and villagers who shaped history through small, deliberate actions. Every curve, ridge, and tower reminds us of the delicate balance between human effort and natural rhythm, of the subtle interactions that sustain life and memory across centuries. In this quiet reflection, we see that the Great Wall is not merely a relic of the past, it is a gentle, enduring presence that teaches us patience, persistence, and the beauty of continuity. Its legacy lives on, whispering softly through mountains and valleys, inviting us to slow down, observe, and appreciate the quiet strength of human endeavor intertwined with the world around it. As our quiet journey along the Great Wall comes to its gentle conclusion, it is comforting to pause and let the mind rest upon the stories, rhythms, and enduring presence of this remarkable structure. The wall stretches across mountains, rivers, and plains, silently witnessing the ebb and flow of centuries. It is more than stone and earth. It is a repository of human effort, a record of countless lives lived in harmony with labor, landscape, and the passing seasons. Another peaceful reflection emerges when considering the generations who built, maintained, and guarded the wall. Soldiers watched tirelessly from towers, laborers carried earth and stone across ridges and valleys, and villagers nurtured their communities nearby. Each contributed quietly to the enduring story of the wall, leaving traces in its curves, layers, and towers that continue to whisper across time. Life along the wall was shaped by both human diligence and the natural world. Winter snow softened the lines of the mountains and the wall itself, creating moments of stillness and reflection. Summer heat demanded patience and steady effort, while spring and autumn brought cycles of planting, harvesting, and movement that connected communities to the broader rhythms of life. In these interactions, the wall became more than a barrier. It became a guide, a companion, and a quiet witness to human endurance and creativity. Another gentle aspect to consider is the symbolic meaning the wall carries. It represents perseverance, vigilance, and adaptation, but also connection. Its towers communicated across miles, its paths guided travelers, and its presence influenced communities, trade, and cultural exchange. The wall is a reminder that human effort can shape the landscape with care, respect, and continuity. Modern preservation ensures that these lessons continue, repairing crumbling stones, reinforcing earth, and documenting history allows the wall to speak across generations, bridging the past and the present in quiet harmony. Visitors walking along its stretches can feel the pulse of history, sensing both the human hands that built it and the enduring rhythms of nature around it. As our reflection softens, it is gentle to imagine the wall at sunset, the ridges glowing with warm light, shadows stretching across valleys, and the landscape quiet except for distant birds or the whisper of wind. The Great Wall embodies patience, endurance, and the quiet beauty of continuity. It reminds us that history is not only found in grand events or battles, but also in the daily lives of people, the rhythms of nature, and the subtle, persistent efforts that ripple across generations. And so, as our journey comes to an end, let your thoughts settle along the wall's curves. Imagine the watchtowers, the laborers, the villages, and the sweeping landscape. Let the echoes of centuries of human effort drift softly into the background. Allow yourself to rest, breathe slowly, and feel the calm presence of history around you. For now, you do not need to do anything at all. The Great Wall stands quietly, a testament to endurance, care, and the subtle beauty of time passing. Let this peaceful reflection carry you gently as you drift toward rest and sleep. Thank you for sharing this quiet moment, exploring the enduring story of the Great Wall, and allowing its gentle rhythms to guide you. Until our next journey through history, good night.